The Tech It Up Talk podcast aspires to educate, inform, and inspire educators from teachers to school leaders on tips, tools, and resources to support the integration of technology into classroom instruction.
You ready? Here we go.
You're listening to Tech It Up Talk with Dr. Mac, your host with the most passion for supporting educators from teachers to school leaders with the integration of technology. Today, we are diving into a conversation about how learning design shapes school culture and fosters excellence in education. My guest today here is Chris Larsey, who is a dedicated educator, a thought leader, and a contributing author to Get Your Tech Together, Rethinking School Culture in a Digital Age. His chapter on cultivating excellence and building culture through learning design really explores the critical role of intentional learning design plays in creating engaging and a thriving school culture. So, welcome, Chris, to the Tech It Up Talk podcast. We are super excited to have you here today. Just share your journey with us in education.
Hey, Dr. Mac, happy to be here. I'm super excited. Yeah, so I'm Chris Larsey. So kind of as I think I was talking to Dr. Mac one day, and you described it as the family business. I come from a big family of educators, mom, dad, sisters, all in the education world. So I think it came naturally to me when I ended up forging my own path through education. So spent years as a middle school teacher. And then had other years as a home instruction teacher, which included virtual schools through, that little pandemic we all went through. And then found myself in a district role through kind of being passionate about and leveraging technology in my lessons and doing professional learning for myself. Began to really consider that learning design element of support and helping others through education, and worked at a district level. And then Dr. Mack and I got to work together in Bastrop ISD and the digital learning team, where we ran a lot of different initiatives, blended learning, and really just kind of design culture in a district and at a level to really make an impact, and seeing what that looks like. So that's the short version of it, but I'm sure we'll get into it more as we go on.
Yes, yes. We have been in the work together. And so I can't wait for you to share with all who will be watching and tuning in to really share more perspective. And so, what inspired you to really write about learning design and school culture?
Absolutely. And so I think it's mostly came from my own experiences and what, as a teacher, I found to be what was so impactful. And I was just naturally really interested in technology, and started on my own, just finding ways to leverage technology to increase student engagement, student ownership, make my life easier. And then I had the opportunity to engage in some really powerful learning through a 2-year program that really had us jumping into like the iterative design process. So we were able to set goals for ourselves and what we wanted to improve on our teaching practice, and then design lesson design that utilized some of the learning that we were going through around those blended and personalized learning practices. And then we were able to reflect on what we had implemented and kind of start the process back over again. And I found that so powerful for both my own growth and then for my student growth, and really all of that work being student centered, and the experience I was going through modeled that best practice, and it was very learner centered, and it focused on me being able to take ownership of my growth and development. And I just found that so powerful. And I thought, why isn't everybody doing this? I say this story of, like, if you walked into the cardboard box manufacturing industry and they weren't teaching each other very well, you'd go, okay, well, they're the cardboard box makers. They're good at making cardboard boxes. Maybe they're not good at teaching. But when we walk into a school and we're not good at teaching each other, and we're sitting in front of slide decks and non-engaging presentations, and the folks are half falling asleep, you're going, what are we doing here? We have got to practice what we preach. And it is just that much more powerful, and the end result shows in what students get out of it when we empower educators and truly cultivate, really pour into and grow, our teachers, our leaders, and that makes for a more strong organization.
Ooh, I love it. Now, one of the things I love about your chapter is that the way it starts off. And so You do this, dear campus leaders, instructional leaders, like all you leaders out there are in school districts or managing schools or some stakeholder and supporting schools, and anyone else involved in creating and implementing, professional learning for teachers. I have a wake up call, and then you say, your teachers are bored. And I love because it's so true, right? And so, kind
Yeah.
of share with us why that's such a crucial thing to consider.
Yeah, and I think, we tend to a lot of times we tend to teach in the way that we learned. And so, if we're not really intentional about updating our styles, not only for the students but for our professionals as well, maybe when we were in school, the teacher, lectured through information, or had a bunch of slides up there, and we sat and took notes and stuff. And there's a time and a place for that, and in limited instances, but there's also so much more engagement that can happen. And I've experienced it. I know you have. I know that that sentence probably resonated with a lot of people out there, and that was the goal, is to say, y'all, we got to do something better than this. And if you're not aware, your 500 slide decks are putting people to sleep, and that's just not doing what you want to do. And so the
Right.
same information, the same content, the same what you're getting at can happen, but we've got to change what it looks like and how our professionals interact with it.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, because a lot. I know sometimes we treat our trainings or support and professional development as checkoff lists. Well, I did it, therefore it must. I gave you the information. Go take it and fly, right? But that's not really a best practice, and it's really important for leaders to model what we like to see happening in classrooms, especially now. We're finding that there's a shortage of teachers out there. And a lot of them are not coming or starting with education backgrounds. Like even myself, I didn't start with an education background. And so, just really modeling and being intentional about the small things and indirectly making that positive impact in your culture, I think is really key. Really key.
Absolutely. And I think, when you talk about why do folks not feel satisfied with their work, or they choose to go into a different industry, I think, a couple of pieces that I talk about in the chapter is that a lot of this is hinged upon respect, not only respect for our students, because we want to be the best teachers that we can for them, to give them the best learning experience, but also respect for our professionals. And I think sometimes it comes back to that idea of control. Well, if I release too much, or I give them too many choices, is it really going to be follow through? Are they really going to do it? That kind of thing. And we have to respect them enough to know that they're going to value their own growth. And then the other side of that I talk about is the trust piece. We've got to trust that they are going to, you know, take the lead, or follow the lead.
Right.
And going back to exactly what you talked about, if you're modeling that and you're willing to be vulnerable as a leader, you're willing to say, hey, I don't have all the answers, I'm growing too, and this is what my growth process looks like. I think that's very powerful, and I think folks resonate with that. And they're willing to follow behind you and say, okay, I'm going to get a little bit uncomfortable, and I'm going to put myself through some learning experiences so that I can grow as well. So I think that's all part of it.
Oh, I love that. So, with that said, why is school culture such a crucial factor in student success?
That's exactly it. And I think the other thing I'm proud of, because we were asked to put a quote at the beginning of the book, and I said, "Is this a quote I'm supposed to find that somebody else wrote?" And you said, "No, you need to write it." So I was like, "Okay, let me come up with a good quote." And I forget exactly what it was, but the idea was that the culture is the soil, right? This whole cultivating, growing theme, but it's like that culture is that soil that everything can thrive within. If that is no good and doesn't have good quality nutrients, nothing can grow in there. So we have to build that. We talk about it as a foundation a lot of times, in a different analogy, but as that soil that someone can grow and thrive within, it permeates all aspects of the organization. And so, people say you can't see it, you can't name it, but culture is what you feel, and what's lived and what's done. And it's really about leading by example, and being, again, leading and creating the type of organization that you want there to be. There's another quote that I encountered recently that I've just been so obsessed with. And the quote says, and again, it goes back to this word cultivate that I love. The quote says, to heal yourself, cultivate the world. To heal the world, cultivate yourself. And I think it just speaks to that same idea of, we really, it's that idea, be the change that you want to see in the world. Like we have to um, take those actions, those small actions, the level that we can do as individuals, and know that that's going to ripple out and grow others, inspire others, and create a bigger change over the course of it.
All right. I love it. And then the other part to this is like, why is learning design, like, how does that play the role in really shaping it?
Right. And so going back to that idea, and I'm currently doing some grad school work and getting into kind of the research behind some of these facts that kind of instinctively or kind of on a feelings level I felt to be true, but there's actually a lot of research around it that supports this idea of that iterative learning experience. That it's like kind of like what you said. It's not a checkbox and it's a one and done. Really, learning is more powerful when we revisit it, we rework it, and so being able to design that learning in a way that's going to allow for that. Also, the idea of personalizing the learning. When things are personalized to us and we own the implementation and the pathway or the goals, the types of learning, that the way we're learning, I think it's that much more powerful. And we own that process and it becomes ours, as opposed to going back to the 500 slide deck, is something being done to us or being handed down to us, and that we don't really feel any ownership in that. And so the idea around that learning design is really thinking about, okay, I'm going to kind of build that structure where learning can take place, but within that, these participants or these learners are going to be able to make choices, tailor it to themselves, and really be an integral part of the process. And it's going to yield results that each person is going to be a little different in how they go through it. That's going to be exactly what is, just right for their situation.
Right. Yeah. And for those of you who are just joining us in, we are talking about Chris's chapter in Get Your Tech Together, Cultivating Excellence, Building Culture Through Learning Design. And so this is definitely a key factor. And so one of the things I want Chris to kind of share with us next are challenges that school districts may face. And so, Chris, I'm going to bring you back on. If you can just share with us, what are some challenges that school districts face when trying to implement, or I would say align their learning design with the positive school culture?
Sure. And I think, there's always going to be those challenges. When you talk about, some training being a box that you have to check, I mean, the reality of it is there are boxes we have to check, right? And so, sometimes we can get stuck in that mindset. But where the real powerful learning comes is when we allow folks to really choose their own path, tailor the learning to themselves. And so I think some of the challenges there is a mindset. I speak a lot about that in the chapter of, like, a lot of this is mindset work, and we need to um, again let go of this sense of control or this idea that, well, if I let them make too many choices, it's going to go off the rails, and it very well might. I mean, it can be messy, and so we've got to kind of be willing to live in that mess and continue to move forward and right the ship. This isn't saying the process is going to be perfect, but I think it also has to do with having a strong team. And so part of what's important about kind of growing each other and cultivating, building a culture that cultivates others, is that you do build a strong team that supports this work. And so it's not going to happen overnight. But continuing to move forward and lead by example, I think is really the important part. There's, when I talk about other challenges, there's competing initiatives. Everybody's vying for time, and so I think the other piece that this benefits is that folks have the opportunity to tailor and dig into which initiatives align closer with their work, as opposed to all these 14 different angles coming at one person, and you have to satisfy every piece. It's like, maybe we at the higher level get a little bit together and align some core practices, and then roll that out so that we know whatever's happening, there's a baseline of learning that we want everyone to engage in, and then they get to kind of tailor that final piece and jump into each different lane. If you're thinking about those as district initiatives or what have you.
Yeah. And so, we're this is the Tech It Up Talk podcast. And so, one of the things I want to ask is like, how can technology be leveraged to enhance these learning design implementations and support school culture, a school culture of excellence?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think, just on a basic level, leveraging some kind of learning management system. I mean, that can even be, it doesn't have to be super centralized like a brand name platform, but some way that the learning is organized, I think is super important. And then that also allows for folks to learn beyond the four walls of their building. We talk
Yeah.
about that for students, where we want them to learn beyond the four walls of their classroom, but same for educators. I think there's a lot of value in educators learning from their colleagues on campus. It's really directly aligned with the students that they have, the curriculum that they use. But we also have kind of that next level of learning community, like at the district level, or even going outside of your district to see, what other schools are doing. It really gets the gears turning. It really opens up the opportunity, and allows you to see what can be true. And sometimes, like we know, seeing is believing. And there's times where you tell somebody something, they can
Right.
hear it from you, and they could even see it in a certain context. But sometimes going outside of what they already know to a new scenario, something clicks a little bit differently, and they're able to have more powerful learning experience. So all that is to say, I mean, I think there's a lot of virtual options for just like we're connecting virtually today. You can join um, learning communities that are remote online. There's I go to some, it's Monday nights on Zoom, and we're doing a tech escape room or something, and folks from all across the country, sometimes the world, sharing what their educational contexts look like. So we just have so much opportunity at our fingertips to connect
Wait,
nowadays.
we have an event we're planning? Is that what I hear?
It sounds good.
We're doing a tech escape room worldwide.
Hey, with a,
I
with a bit of
love that.
karaoke sprinkled in there, right?
Oh, we
Like
gotta get that karaoke going. Yes, for sure. Oh man, I love that. And so, let's get to AI. AI
sure.
has been this big factor that has been jumping in and just really changing so much of what we do in our daily lives and definitely in education. So, with AI kind of emerging, and other emerging technologies, kind of changing how we approach education. How do you see learning design like really evolving in the future?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think AI is super powerful and super relevant to these conversations because we've talked before about the idea of AI as a thought partner, a
Right.
brainstorming partner, and as I become more skillful with the tool, it really takes so much of that load, that kind of just the menial work, or the labor intensive part, even thought, cognitive labor intensive part, and I'm able to offboard that. And then I notice that my creative part of myself really comes out a lot more. So I designed a learning session recently for educators where they were instructional coaches, and so we looked at taking some of the document focused tools, like a notebook LM, or like a chat with docs, type of situation where you can plug documents in and then kind of almost have a conversation based on the information in those documents. And so we used um, those to put in their observation rubrics and their coaching guidelines, their coaching strategies, and then say, okay, here's an observation I had. This is what I observed. What should my next moves be? And there's the ideas coming straight through from their resources. So it saves them the time of flipping through pages and having to read and ingest that stuff. And really, they can just dig into like those key strategies that are coming out. Now, again, through this process, I talked about, it's about the humans in the room. So we had a room full of professionals, and I said, you're going to spend some time engaging with this tool, but then you're going to turn at your table and talk with the other professionals about what came out of that and find out if that's the right move. It might be something else may come out of that conversation once you bring the humans in. But all that is to say, I designed the session, by after each part of the session, I kind of pulled the curtain back because I created the session with AI myself. And so I showed them, okay, for this part, I use this prompt. to build this activity. I use this prompt to tell me what to put on this slide. I used the prompt to create the graphics that I used, and we had a lot of fun kind of modeling that of like, okay, this is how I'm using the tool. At the end of the day, I'm making the choices and the moves about what this learning session is going to look like. But I was able to be so much more creative. I was able to do so much more in the time that I had than I would have been able to. And so I think it's really going to be a powerful tool for learning, especially as it continues to grow.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like you said, it's definitely my thought partner on a daily basis. And I love that you really talked about that mental load or that cognitive load because it can weigh in heavy, especially when you are time sensitive and you have so many different things that are happening. You want to give your best at everything, right? But sometimes the cognitive piece is just really takes a toll on you. It's kind of hard to put the work that you would want to, and I know some people are uncomfortable with leveraging AI to do that, but why not? Like it's like what I found when people kind of get past that they see it as a thought partner, another perspective that they may not have thought of before, just having someone else that you're talking to in the room. Hey, I have this idea. What do you think about X, Y, and Z, and how can this play? And that's all that is really doing for you, and it's kind of helping to take that load off. So I love the reducing in the cognitive load and lift that we have to do when we are creating change and ideas and supporting the implementation of learning design in the classroom and modeling for others. Just imagine how much time we can get back, especially teachers getting their time back. I remember having to, when I first started teaching, spending hours after work still trying to get things done. And with AI, I could probably do it. I can go home after school and actually enjoy my family now, right? And so,
Right.
that it's definitely has the potential to do so many things, and not just for our teachers, but for our students as well. And so, for
Yeah.
my next, oh, go ahead.
Well, the last piece I was going to say on there is that, I think some of the reservations and the folks that I've talked to that are like, well, it's doing all the work for me and it takes my voice out of it. And the piece that I come back with is that, well, at the end of the day, I'm the one using it, and so there's been some, you hear about, in Silicon Valley, they're using AI to create their code. And so, programmers will submit code that was written by AI, and then somebody says this code doesn't work, and the excuse is, oh yeah, the AI wrote that. Well, no, you were the human that greenlit the code to go forward. So at the end of the day, that's always it. Whether it's an email or something that you put into a proposal or whatever it is, if you made that call that it's good to go in, then now it's yours and you own it. And that's where that mental energy can shift to, is going, okay, I don't have to build all the whole foundation of the thing, but I can go in and tweak pieces and make adjustments and really get it to sound and be exactly how I want it. But to get that start and that base, I mean, is huge. It saves you so much time and effort for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, can you share an example of a school or district that has successfully built a strong culture, even if it's still in process, through like intentional learning design, and what made this approach effective?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think I would say it's always still in process. I mean, growth is an ongoing process. And so I think sometimes we gotta not trick ourselves that we're ever going to be done. We got to continue to keep to move forward and build on. And I was in a meeting recently, and I had to kind of reset everybody of like, y'all remember, we're talking about the 10% that we're not there yet, but like we're, and our brains like to focus on that, but like really also remember the 90% that we are
Right.
doing. Right. So, and so I think, that's part of it too, of um, keeping that culture going, and just understanding that, you know, your work continues to build on itself. So, currently in my current role with Bastrop ISD, and a lot of the work that we worked on together was about building that foundation, building that culture, and really just getting people on board. And I think it took a lot of just leading by example, brave leadership, whatever you want to call it, just being willing to say, okay, I'm doing this, I'm moving forward, and come along. And some people are going to be, running forward with you, and just on some of them are like, I'll take it or leave it. Some of them are pulling the other direction, right? And you're always going to have all three. So it's that idea of, if you can get that middle group to buy in, and sometimes it takes longer than others. Sometimes they have to, and folks have different personalities, because that came up recently too. Somebody said, well, I'm the type that, I hear all this and it sounds fine and good, but I'm the sit back and I want to really see that it's actually going to happen. And so some people like to wait and see that what you said, or that what you said you were going to do, you were going to do, and then when you do, you've won them over. And so you have to consider that there's those types too. So you'll have some of the people that jump right on because they've been waiting for somebody to say that, and then you've got others that are going to be a little bit more skeptical and say, okay, let's see how this pans out. And the also the reality is you're not going to win 100% of the people over all the time, and that's okay too. And learning how to navigate that is part of the process as well. And so but the idea is to leverage and turn the ship in the direction more towards more of that energy of really leading and owning the work.
Yeah, I love that because that's so true. And I love that sometimes, when you're trying to implement a new initiative, a lot of times they do focus on that 10% or just the few that, are being apprehensive or pushing back, and they make it the whole. It's like, it's not the majority of people saying it all the time. You want to, and even that in building the culture, say we're trying, we're going to fail forward. Even bringing that to the stage of a culture practice that's saying, okay, well, here are some of our deficits or some gaps we need to close. Here's the potential way that we could do that. Let's be intentional about how we try. Maybe we can start with a small group that start implementing, and you'll have your laggards who come on. I always talk about the diffusion of innovation theory with Everett Rogers, because you're going to have that spectrum of folks in different spaces who are, like you said, going to jump on, and who are the ones going to pull away, and some just going to do it force, right? So,
Right,
and
right. Some is gonna take, well, when somebody tells me I have to, then I will. And you know what? But you have to have the other group to get the buy-in for somebody to say to that person, yes, it's time and you do have to do this. So
yeah. I think the buy-in definitely does help because it helps with bringing them over, because once you start saying, or once they start hearing, and sometimes I think if any leaders who are watching this, like, you don't have to be the direct person of the change. It could be an indirect process. You've implemented the implementation of it. It could be someone else, or another person, or that person's peer that's helping move them along. And that's like part of the communication channel. So you want to create a strong communication channel and leverage and build capacity, so that the person you're building capacity in could affect change in another person. So it may not be with you directly. And so that definitely helps with shifting and moving the needle with some of the initiatives that we're implementing in school. So I love that.
yeah, and I love that point because I even in the chapter I talk about how you have to have a team. You can't. This is not a solo effort, and it may be building a team and building a coalition that's going to champion these things that you want to initiate. But the also that idea of like spreading that word, and so that you're not the only one saying these things, and when those like you said, when those positive things start to come from all these different angles, and oh, this teacher that I really respect also said that, it's not just Chris saying that, it's this other person I respect, or oh, I'm hearing a kid say that they really liked what was happening here, and I know what's best for kids is what we're trying to do. So the more angles and the more voices that can be speaking that thing, higher likelihood that one of those is going to be the one that that person needed to hear to make it finally click.
I love that. Well, if listeners could take away one key message about cultivating excellence through learning design, what would it be?
No more 500 slide PowerPoint. No. No, but truly, I mean, it's and I know there's a difference between adult learning theory and students, but we do have to treat our professionals um, in a way that they deserve a rich learning experience. And so they deserve to grow and learn just like how we want that for our students. And so again, we have to respect them enough to offer them that, and we have to trust them enough that when offered that opportunity, that they're going to be successful with it. Is it going to be perfect? No. But nothing is. And so we've got to be brave and lead that work. And I think you will find that the organization is that much more strong for building a space where everyone can grow.
Right. Well, thank you, Chris, so much for joining me today. How can other people connect with you? I know you have your
Well, I
phone
got
across
my
the screen. Yeah.
I got my crawl down here, but yeah, if I search me up, I'm on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with folks. I'm really trying to continue to build that personal learning network that's super powerful. And so, at TCEA recently, I was able to connect with a lot of folks and really pick their brains. And I think that's the great thing about those events is just getting to have those conversations. But we can take it online too. So, I'm really happy to connect with folks and find out how we can support each other and move forward. So, do great things.
All right. Well, Chris, thank you so much for sharing your expertise on how learning design can and shape and strengthen school culture. Your insights really challenge us to think differently about how we create meaningful learning experiences that cultivate excellence in education. And educators, if you're ready to transform the way learning is designed in your schools, be sure to grab a copy of our book, Get Your Tech Together. It's available on Amazon or contact Chris directly. um, so again, it's available out there. Connect with Chris for more strategies. As always, thank you for tuning in to Tech It Up Talk with Dr. Mac, where we explore how to level up learning with technology. Until next time, keep innovating, keep inspiring, and keep leading with tech. And so thank you guys for your time today.